Hello, I'm Jeannie Culverson. I am the Noteworthy Mom, and this is Koffee&Kiddos. Tonight's episode is about depression, and I call this episode the Big D because this is about something that nobody really wants to talk about. And tonight with me is my son Kane and my son Joey.
Hi.
Kane, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a current college student in Sedalia, Missouri, and I go day to day pretty much doing my own thing.
How old are you?
I'm 19.
Okay. And when will you be 20? July.
Yeah.
In about 6 months. Helping you out. Okay, Joey, you want to tell us about yourself?
Yeah. My nickname's Joey. I go by Christian. My last name's Corson. So when I'm 13, I go to John Boyce Middle School. I'm in wrestling. I did cross country and I'll be in track this year.
Okay. Well, again, this episode is about depression, and the reason why we're covering this is because depression is really on the rise, and it's up by anywhere from 56 to 65% in 2020 due to coronavirus. And one of the things that I've noticed, and the reason why I said that nobody wants to talk about depression is because people avoid it, and this is very true, and that's why they call it the silent killer. You know, it's something that if you share about it on Facebook, people avoid talking about it. I actually did a little mini test on my personal Facebook page. I've been sharing about this upcoming episode and taking notice on how many people liked or commented on it or shared about it. And let me just say that it was very few. And it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be talked about. Studies show that if you ask people if they're okay, and then ask them if they're really okay, and then follow up a couple of days later, you can actually make a difference by doing this. But you have to make sure you follow up within a couple of days. If you don't follow up, then it doesn't really make a difference. Most of us are used to saying, I'm just fine. That's always the go-to answer, because nobody really truly cares if you're okay. Everybody goes, oh, how you doing, you know, in the typical day-to-day life, and that's usually how it goes, am I right? Yeah. So, anyways, the silent epidemic sweeping our nation claims an average of more than 100 young lives each week. 1 out of 12 young people in our nation attempted suicide in the previous 12 months. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24, and children as young as 9 years old are attempting suicide every day. More teenagers and young adults die from suicide than from cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, influenza, chronic lung disease combined. Each day in our nation, there is an average of over 3,703 attempts by young people, grades 9 through 12. And if these percentages are additionally applied to grades 7 and 8, the numbers would be higher. And 4 out of 5 teens who attempt suicide have given clear warning signs that have been ignored. So, 3 out of 4 teenagers are seriously struggling with depression right now, and 1 out of 4, maybe more, that's 25%, are seriously thinking about suicide. And those statistics are very frightening, and I have 6 children right now, and 4 of them are teenagers. So, how many stories have you guys heard that it's usually the ones that are happy-go-lucky and they're always smiling? Nobody even saw it coming.
Well, I mean, I've always kind of taken notice of people like that, and the fun part about that is it depends on the environment that you get them in, because they're not always happy-go-lucky. A lot of times one-on-one, when there's not people to show off in front of, a lot of times they'll drop their guard, and you can actually see kind of the damage, I guess.
Yeah.
When I was in Boy Scouts, there's a few people that I've noticed that were down, so I'd go with them. And throughout school, I've been with people who seem like they need someone to talk to.
That's always good. And you shared a story with me about somebody who checked on you when you had a bad day.
Yeah.
In band. And that meant a lot to you, too.
Yeah.
You still wave at her, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
That's pretty cool. And, well, I think the ones that are happy-go-lucky and always smiling, I think that the reason why nobody ever saw it coming is because it's more of an impulse thing. Like, maybe they're sensitive when they're having a really bad day, and then they just want the pain to end. I think it's more of an impulse that it happens. That's why nobody saw it coming.
You know, I kind of disagree on that too. You know, you mentioned the statistic that 4 out of 5 show warning signs. I don't know that it could be as spontaneous as just one day they decide. I think that there's a lot of build up to it, and eventually it just kind of goes off. So it's not so much about one day or the next. It's just one day something breaks, and it could be that day or it could be a week from then.
Mm-hmm. Could they be that 1 out of 5?
I really don't know about that, because in my experience, a lot of people, if you ask certain people outright, depending on who they are, they will tell you that they're fine, and then in private, oftentimes they won't.
Mm-hmm.
But there's, obvious signs, and in our generation, my personal generation, a lot of us, we joke about it on the daily, like anything happens, like a major test, oh, I'm going to go kill myself, and none of us think anything of it.
True.
So, the signs that are actually there are often misread as just our humor.
Mm. And I can say adults even make that joke, and Joey, we even had that conversation about you guys make that joke as well.
We have.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is right, but isn't depression the number 1 cause of death?
I believe it's the second cause.
Okay.
Suicide. Depression often leads to it.
I've noticed one thing. Some people aren't serious, but there's a reason school counselors are here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always someone for you to talk to at the school.
True. But often, these situations that if somebody's really serious about suicide, they often don't reach out.
And I think that they do reach out. I think there are attempts to grab help, and I think that when those attempts are missed, that's a lot of what leads to it, And it could just be something as casual as, see you later, nah you won't, or, something like that, that's just very passing, very fleeting. And I think a lot of problem is he mentioned school counselors, and there's always someone to talk to. Some school counselors take the time to go and build bonds with the students, but it's the students they don't bond with that are the most at risk, I think. Mm-hmm. And even if they are noticed, a lot of them are more closed off because of reasons that, there could be a generational gap or a gender gap. There's a lot of different things. At the high school I attended previously, I know he was a 30-something-year-old bald dude who was, pretty busy most of the time, so he would make time to, say hi or bye in the hallways, but not for much else, unless someone was actually reported to him.
Right. Do you think if they had more counselors, it would make a difference?
I don't think it's necessarily the quantity, I think it is the quality.
Yeah.
And, you get counselors who, they want to help. It's just there's so many students about it, and I don't know that number helps, because some people have the passion for it and some people don't. And in the industry that works, you just have to fill positions the best you can. So oftentimes you may get a student who just got out of college and need a paycheck. They just happen to have the qualifications for a guidance counselor. That doesn't mean they're good at their job.
Okay. So a lot of what we're talking about here has to do with just being a teenager in general. Now let's try to move more into how social distancing and being alone and being lonely has affected us more. I want to read this article. It was printed on December 9th by the Daily Wire, and on my blog I'm going to have the links to all of these articles and cite my sources. It says a 16-year-old boy in Maine, despondent over his isolation because of coronavirus restrictions that made his school resort to remote learning, committed suicide last Friday, triggering his mom to write on Facebook, "This remote learning is crap." Spencer Smith, a sophomore at Brunswick High School, felt increasingly isolated as a result of distance learning. He had dreams of playing lineman on the Brunswick High School football team, but those hopes were dashed when it was replaced by flag football. As soon as he found out it wasn't going to be a regular football season, looking back, we noticed he stopped working out. He stopped riding his bike, so much to the point he didn't even work out anymore. Instead of working out, he took naps. The last few months, we realized we missed catching the signs that things were getting worse for him. It wasn't the same type of practice because they had to social distance. At one point, the teenager was attending in-person school 1 day a week, but then asked his parents if he could stay home because he found it too difficult not being able to interact with his peers. His son left a note behind detailing his struggles with being isolated, writing that he felt like he was locked in his house. "This remote learning is crap. I just lost a son because he couldn't be with his friends. He was trapped in the house. He felt like he lost his friends and had a hard time with his schoolwork, so he took the easy way out. Parents, please take everything your kids are saying seriously. Give them a huge hug and don't let go. You never know if it will be the last time. I would give anything to have him back. He was a fun-loving kid, but we didn't see the pain he was apparently living in. I'm not doing this about Spencer. I'm not trying to talk to you about Spencer. I'm talking about all teenagers and the way they feel. He wasn't average. He was our son. But that's not the life he wanted. He wanted more out of life. He wanted everything out of life." So, anyways, something else here is that the school issued a letter to the families. The superintendent did, which he's like, the school issued a statement that said, "I want to take this opportunity to remind our community that suicide, when it does occur, is a very complicated act." I personally kind of roll my eyes at these issued notes because, how is this going to change anybody else's mind?
Yeah, that's true.
In the future.
The average...
they have to issue a statement, but really, how is this going to change anything? It doesn't bring the boy back. It doesn't affect anybody in the future. But anyways, so overall, any thoughts? Kane, you could go first, and then...
Well, just in that article, the isolation that he felt, today, and today before coronavirus, we were already experiencing, a high rate, one of the highest rates of suicide, in history, and it was definitely on the rise. And, depending on who you ask, people attributed it to technology pulling people apart. But since coronavirus has started, I definitely feel like school is a great place to interact with people, and you learn social skills. And, oftentimes, in that article, he was a football player. A lot of times there's a lot of contact, there's a lot of, brotherhood between people, and it's kind of, when you fill a cup and then you empty it out, you can say that it was empty because it was once full. it's kind of like having that feeling ripped away, and that, you know, that can cause a lot of like isolation anxiety, and I imagine that's what he struggled with from the sound of it. And so not even being able to interact with people, you know, you start losing that energy you had. And depression itself is not just, you know, being sad or, you know, it's literally a drain of energy. You know, it makes it impossible to, you know, sometimes even get out of bed in the morning or even care about bettering yourself.
Well, you know, keep in mind, one thing that I didn't mention is I don't have a doctorate or even a master's degree, but I do have an associate's degree in psychology. And one of the things that I do know is that depression, some of the things that contribute to depression is lack of exercise. Not getting enough exercise, not getting enough sunlight. Those things, the things that you eat in your diet or don't eat in your diet, can contribute to depression. So do you think that his lack of exercise, the physical working out and things like that, probably contributed to that as well?
I think he didn't have something to aim for, and that's probably what made him sad. I've also noticed the average person probably needs 2 hugs a day to feel like they be cared for. The person who doesn't talk a lot, be there for them.
That's very true.
Sometimes the people who act out, they may be looking for attention because they're getting lonely.
Well, psychology is very complicated.
Yeah.
It is.
I don't know that the exercise itself is what helped attribute to it. I'm sure that it didn't help any. It's just, I feel like once he began going down, it was just an all downhill slope, and you know, you just stop finding enjoyment in the things you used to. And so, you know, he probably worked out several times in between the period between stopping and going regularly. He probably worked out and found absolutely zero enjoyment of it.
Well, there is none when you are used to working out with your peers. Working out alone is just not the same. It really isn't.
Yeah, some people are just adventurous and they want to explore new things so they'll never be bored. And since coronavirus, it gives people so much entrapment like a cage.
That's true too.
I'd also like to point out that this video is not scripted.
No.
It's all opinion.
I mean, we have some points to touch on, but one of the things you forgot, did you actually mention what program that you're in college?
I'm actually studying for my associate's degree in art and majoring in criminal justice.
So you're, are you in some psychology classes as well?
I'm set to, but I took some in high school as well. And, you know, I spent a lot of time studying depression, how it works, for a couple essay papers in college.
Yeah. One of the things I was wanting to actually ask you about is, both of you guys, have you noticed a difference before coronavirus, how many of your friends were depressed or suicidal?
Yeah.
To now, how many are depressed or suicidal? Has there been an increase, or is it about the same? Or because you guys have actually been one of the luckier ones because you have been in school this year.
Well, I haven't noticed a increase. You know, I haven't had anyone that I know commit suicide, but I know that overall people are unhappy. You know, a lot of people, especially around that it's getting to Christmas time, you know, people every year, depression and other mental issues flare up during the Christmas time, the holiday season. And so if you multiply that with just the social distancing and the fact that, you know, some government agencies are talking about quarantining entire cities.
And going back to virtual learning.
Yeah, and you know, you're looking at isolating not just students now, but entire families from, you know, their loved ones. And the funny part about humans is that we're very socially aggressive, and a lot of times humans will feed off of each other emotionally. And so when you've got someone who's generally unhappy, there's no energy in them, it starts to affect the people around you. And so, you know, these students that are going in and day out, I was going to college on campus for a while, and even then there was a very big disconnect. It's nothing like you see in media or movies or stories you hear about. You know, you hear about a lot of friendships that are started in college. A lot of people meet their future fiancés.
Yeah.
And my personal experience is I started at 9 o'clock in the morning and went till about 2:30 in the afternoon. And if I didn't have like a lecture from a teacher, I don't think I said an entire word at all to anyone. You know, and it wasn't just me that it was like that for. You know, because you're getting people from all over the place. Like in high school, a lot of times you have kids who grow up together, and you know, but it's impossible to meet someone with all these mask mandates and social distancing. You're just not allowed to interact.
One of the things that studies have shown is because you guys are teenagers or even children, because you guys are so young, your lives are relatively short. So time seems so long to you guys. To us, it's like a blink of an eye, because I mean, I'm almost 40 years old, so the closer you get to the end of your life, it's like toilet paper. The closer you get, the faster it goes.
Yeah.
So a year to you guys, like a school year, seems to drag on and last for a really long time. So I think what it kind of contributes to suicide for you guys is even this coronavirus pandemic. We were supposed to mask up for 2 weeks. It's been well over 270 days now. It should have been gone. It should have been over with, should have been done with, and we're still social distancing and wearing masks, and it doesn't look like it's going to go anytime soon, that it's going anywhere. I think part of the problem is that because it lasts so long, and it seems to last a long time to you guys, longer, and and you guys don't see an end. I think that contributes to suicide to young people. It's because you guys don't see any other end or another way out.
One thing I've noticed, that if someone were to come up to you alone that you know closely and they seem like they're sad or something, don't give them a hard time and say you don't have enough stress to be depressed, because everyone's feelings and stress is at certain levels where they can only handle so much.
Right, that's true. Everybody goes through their own struggles and feels things different ways.
Well, on that, being on the other side of high school now that I've graduated, things are so much more different, because, a couple of years ago, one of my biggest worries was, am I going to pass this class, or, what am I doing today in this class? What kind of project do I have? How long do I have it for? And so a lot of stressors that come from just in schoolwork, and it was one thing when you had teachers who were available to teach you, to ask questions to, were physically present, or you had even other students to collaborate with. Now that people are being forced to be at home and they're being sent to work online, there's not a human connection. You can't collaborate with someone the same way you would in the classroom, or even ask a teacher a question. And so you have basically, in effect, just kind of taken a molehill and turned it into a mountain already. And a lot of things go hand in hand with depression. A lot of people with ADHD and high intelligence suffer from depression as well. And so people with ADHD have a lot of trouble focusing, and I personally, you know, when the college switched us over to completely online learning, I had been going on campus for about, I want to say about 5 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
And, the difference is just so wild, because that it takes the structure of a classroom, that's kind of designed to pull your attention and, keep you focused on something. You are suddenly, surrounded by thousands of distractions, like here at the house, I've got my work schedule now, and I've got all of my siblings. I got house, my room to straighten up. There's food, there's places to go. It's not geared for learning.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much, like, you walk into one room, there's, a kid playing, or you walk into another and there's a TV playing. I'd say for a lot of people it's just impossible to just sit down and focus unless you completely isolate yourself.
Yeah.
Another thing I've noticed is, like many years before, of course, people could talk to each other like Townley. And now that it's a time past, the internet came out, so more people were interested in that. And so people got less and less to know each other, and on the internet you can't really tell tone because it's all monotone or not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Calls are not the same either. Now with coronavirus, it makes it a lot harder.
Well, that brings up another good point too, is keyboard warriors, or people that sit behind a keyboard and tell people to go kill themselves. We talked about that recently as well. All jokes aside, one of the things that I noticed after the election is how many people would get mad at each other and say, why don't you just go kill yourself?
And, that's interesting. When I was writing one of my papers, I had to do some research, and so I went to the Department of Health and Human Services, and they actually study the phenomenon that, when you're around people who have depression and are suicidal, it affects everyone around you. And it's not just being in contact with people, it's seeing it on the internet, it's seeing it, in chat rooms, like, Instagram and Facebook are especially heinous,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't always just have to add someone. Anyone can comment on,
Mm-hmm.
An open page,
Mm-hmm. That's one thing, is especially after the election, that's one place where I actually stopped following news media. I got off of all the media places on Facebook because people were just being downright hateful to each other. I don't necessarily agree with all the candidates, and I don't necessarily agree with everybody's, opinions, but I do agree that everybody has a right to their opinion. I don't agree with the name calling and calling people all these awful names. So once the name calling and stuff like that starts, that's when I'm out, So anyways, that's when I started unfollowing all of the media broadcasting places and got out of there, because it really brought me down. That's when I started getting depressed and having like that sick feeling put in my stomach, is just people were just being downright hateful to each other.
To add on that, some people on the media, sometimes they have just nothing to do, so they'll bully and all sorts of stuff.
I think so.
And also drugs, they give you moments of relief, but not forever, and causes people to go into more depression.
I'm
Drinking, smoking,
really
all that
glad
really
that
adds onto it.
Really glad that you brought that up, because from 1999 to 2000, suicide rose 35%. But between 2007 and 2018, suicide rose 56% among teens and young adults. And that actually leads into increased anxiety, depression, and substance abuse. Because while anxiety and depression were going up, so was substance abuse, and there's a correlation between that. What we don't know is if the drug abuse was causing the depression or if the depression was causing the drug abuse. Does that make sense?
I mean, there's a lot of different factors that come into that. You know, in high school you have a lot of people will go and try weed, you know, for the first time, and you know, some of them stick with it, and some of them don't, you know. But you know, those people who are more prone to depression, you know, they'll try that and they'll like the release it gives them, and that I feel like it's not just one causing the other. I think that both of the things are present because you already have that just feeling, and then you add that release to it, and you know, it forcibly causes the endorphins in your brain to be produced, and your brain can only produce them so fast, and so that's why the high lessens over time.
Which brings me to my next set of notes here. Okay, so 3 in 4 young adults are struggling with at least one mental health problem, such as anxiety and depressive disorders, trauma and stress disorders, or substance use disorder. So, I've always been very open with you guys about the things I've learned. Substance use disorder is a factor here. There's a difference between substance use or substance abuse. Some drugs, when you use them the first time, or alternatively over longer periods of time, it depends on what it is, how much you use that certain thing, or if you use higher dosages. They change the chemical makeup of your brain because the chemistry of the drug mimics the chemistry of your brain, or the dopamine, certain things like that, and dopamine and your endorphins, and certain chemicals that are in your brain.
Yeah.
So, anyways, the chemical makeup of those chemicals in your brain is so similar to that drug that your brain thinks your body no longer needs to make it, or it dumps off all of your endorphins. So then your brain can no longer keep up with making your endorphins. So then you no longer have the endorphins you need. So then you're in a very long depression, like an endless depression. So after that euphoria wears off and you stay in that endless cycle of depression, it's like a never-ending life of depression, and that also contributes to suicide. So hold on, I know you want to talk. I can see it.
Yeah.
But you have to hold on a second. So you know that certain antidepressants like Wellbutrin, they always come with that warning, like this could, you know, contribute to suicide or, you know, even homicide, murder, that sort of thing. They come with those warning labels. The reason for that is because if you end up dumping off all those endorphins and you end up having that depression and you commit suicide because of this issue, you know, you dump off all those endorphins and you end up in that depression.
Power off.
Oh, I guess our speaker was still on. Anyways, that is a possibility because of it mimicking, it's giving you the endorphins. It's because of the chemical makeup. It's supposed to do that. So if you take too much of it and you get those endorphins and it mimics those and you end up having depression because of it and you end up committing suicide, that is something that can happen from taking antidepressants. That's why they have to have that warning on those antidepressants. So, what did you want to say?
Another subject as it may be money, because
that is actually a factor in adults. That's why adults are committing suicide due to coronavirus. That is a factor. It's not actually what we're talking about here. We're talking about young people, but adults, suicides are on the rise. 23% of adults are committing suicide because they're being evicted, they're jobless, they're losing their jobs, They don't have food. They can't afford to eat. We've been promised a stimulus check for the last 6 months. That has never came. People, I even lost my job in March, and here I sit trying to find other ways to bring in income. So that is 23% is on the rise of adults because of coronavirus.
Mainly because they don't have a way out. Like,
True.
they have certain things they enjoy, like TV nowadays, and
Yeah, well, if you can't
electric
pay your
and water.
electric bill, you can't watch your TV. So that's where adults are at right now.
That's what most people in adulthood want these days. Money to use,
Well,
feel freer.
people weren't able to pay their rent or their mortgage. They're being evicted. They're being foreclosed on. They're not able to buy food. They're not able to buy their medications. Again, they were promised a stimulus check that never came. Unemployment has run out. I couldn't get unemployment because my job not only fired me, but then they denied me unemployment and they blackballed me on top of it. So, people are in a bad way all the way around.
Yeah.
Teenagers are being social distanced and virtual learning. Adults are, unable to, make ends meet. Everybody's in a bad way because of coronavirus. And so, yeah, that's why suicides are on the rise. In adults, it's 23%, and with teenagers, it's around 66% is since coronavirus, since March.
Another thing is it's harder to get people to be happier, especially to know about what things may cause depression, because most videos don't get out or go viral to help people.
But also that thing that I pointed out earlier about following up with people to ask them if they're okay. Studies show that you can actually help slash suicide rates by half if you follow up with your friends. If you know somebody is struggling and you know that they're not doing okay, if you follow up with them, you can help cut suicide rates by half.
Another thing is, even if you don't have much, you should give them gifts that'll make them feel like they have earned it or done something right, which they most likely have.
If you can. If you know somebody's in need of something, if you know that they need food, or you know that they need, whatever it is that they need, you can always help somebody out. When I was in high school, we knew of a student that needed deodorant and soap. So we all got together and got them deodorant and soap, and they thought it was an insult. They thought that we were being insulting, like accusing them of being the smelly kid, and they threw it in the garbage and got mad. So you gotta be careful about that. They took it the wrong way.
Another cause of suicide is bullying.
Yes. But that's different from coronavirus. We're mostly talking about that here. So something else that I want to talk about too is they're expecting to put in what's called a 988 number. We have 911. But unfortunately, they're not putting in this number until July of 2022. 4,000 kids try to kill themselves every single day. 1 in 12 actually are successful. 100 kids die every week. So in the next year and a half, July of 2022, the next year and a half, 100 kids, that's 5,000, and help me math here, 52 weeks a year, 100 a week.
That's 400 a month, 12.
52 weeks a year. 52 weeks a year for a year and a half.
It's like 5,200 or something like that.
Times a year and a half. So. Anyway, so they're not even gonna have this for a year and a half. And even now, what they have in place for depression, suicide, if you call the suicide hotline, they might be able to talk to you for a while, but if you're wanting to go in-house, they have maybe, 16 beds, or, mental hospitals, things like that. You want to check yourself in, you go on a waiting list. So that's really not a whole lot of help. It depends on where you're at, though. I mean, I don't know personally what they have here, or certain other places.
Well, I mean, in Missouri, and this is kind of from a friend's experience, a lot of times there are beds available to those on a doctor's referral, but the difficulty in getting that referral is astronomical, and so some kids attempt suicide because they can't get that help because, someone thinks that it isn't serious enough. And I don't really think that's the fault of the doctor or anyone, because people try to hide that thing in them because it's something that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to bring anybody else down with them, and so they'll downplay their symptoms. And this is another thing that I researched from the Health and Human Services Department is they did a study during this year, and they found that 40% of all mental health cases rose in adults, and then of that 40% of them, over 30% of that, they downplayed their symptoms or completely ignored them altogether.
Yeah.
And so even when dealing with this kind of thing, you have people who are more open about it. The people that reach out to someone just before they down their bottle of pills, or jump off of their bed with that rope around. Not everyone wants to reach out like that, and that's why you have to be more proactive. But noticing what it looks like, I think, is the hardest part, because you have so much media presence on it, but when the going gets tough, no one really wants to help. No one knows how to approach it.
Yeah.
I think I know one way that may help. So with coronavirus and all, making people alone, most people usually need someone to be with, something to be with. So that's why companions or pets even help.
Which I think it's a great thing that PTSD is now recognized as a reason to have a service animal. I think that's really important. But that in most cases, that's for veterans, but it doesn't really help with coronavirus. But with the coronavirus pandemic, what we have in place right now is incredibly insufficient for the health and depression. Your health, your physical health, and your mental health go hand in hand, but they are not treating them as such. Those who have home state health, Medicaid, your health, your basic bottom of the barrel, state health plan, okay, which a lot of people have right now because a lot of people are jobless since coronavirus, okay, no shame in that. That's what I have because I'm jobless right now. Your mental health goes right out the window. I will guarantee you right now, the chances are my mental health is not going to be paid for. If I went in and said, hey, I'm suicidal, can I get some counseling? They're going to tell me up front that I'm out of luck. I would almost guarantee it. And even then, it's only going to pay for kids like Joey, for example. You're 13. You would probably be able to go in is it once a month, once a week?
Once every 2 weeks was
once every
what I
2
was
weeks?
doing for a while.
Yeah.
And I was lucky because they had just one space open, and they had 30 other people who were in the waiting list.
But I think you were told that she couldn't do it anymore because she left the office. Am I right?
Well,
she retired?
She didn't retire. She had to go to another facility and focus on that more because the demand was just so much greater in that city.
But the demand is so great, and we have so few child psychologists and child psychiatrists in Missouri. Trust me, I know this because I've 6 kids. I've been around, the mental health care and being in college for psychology. I have friends. I have a friend right now that's going through, her psychology degree.
Yeah.
And there is a great need for child psychologists. And the problem is that before you can even start practicing as a psychologist, you have to have nothing less than a master's. Nothing less. And that's even to get an internship. So, but anyways, hand in hand, physical health, mental health. But here lately when I go to the doctor, they start asking me, oh, are you depressed, blah, blah, blah. Have they asked you those questions?
No, they haven't. They ask me, do you have symptoms, coronavirus, do you have fever,
Yeah.
sweating, coughs?
You get asked that at least twice when you go to the doctor. But they also ask me if I've been depressed or anything here lately. But it's not like they call you at home to ask you if you're doing okay. What?
Another thing to add is people who may be in school like me, if they are in school, might be able to talk to their counselor daily, and that usually does help. But then again, like you pointed out earlier, most people aren't willing to go up and talk to people about their depression. It's a subject no one talks about.
I think a lot of their counselors would be too overwhelmed to call all the kids or to talk to all the kids. And I think a lot... Here, let me read about this one boy. He was 16 when he killed himself. And in his letter, he wrote about... Let me pull it up. His name was Christian, as it turns out. I'm just gonna see if I can find it. He discovered only later the notes on Christian's laptop just how badly the pandemic was fraying his son's mind. Christian could no longer hang out every weekend with his 3 best friends who had helped him through bouts of depression. He had a voice inside whispering about how worthless he was, how he was hated by everyone. Part of his problem, as he found out in the notes and stuff, is that he felt like he was a burden to everyone. He was stuck in life right now, not able to get a job, not able to plan and see a way forward. He was feeling like a burden. And so, as a teenager at home, you're feeling like a burden. You're not going to want to reach out and burden your counselor more, or burden your parents more by saying, hey, I'm having this issue. That's part of the problem with a suicidal person, is they're not going to message their best friend and burden them more. When I'm struggling emotionally, I don't message my friends and say, hey, I need some help. I carry the burden alone. And that's why I, myself, in the past, have had serious depression and suicidal tendencies when I was younger. That's why your friends, I told you I can relate to them, why we've had those conversations, is because I often carry the burden alone because I don't want to burden people with my burdens. So people who have suicidal tendencies typically carry the burden alone.
I'll be right back.
Oh, okay, that's fine. We're getting ready to wrap it up anyway. So, anyways, just to wrap it up, the statistics are 1 out of 4 people aged 18 to 25 has seriously contemplated suicide in 2020. 3 out of 4 teenagers are struggling with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts since the pandemic started. 1 out of 3 have serious depression or anxiety directly related to COVID-19 and social distancing. Nearly half of respondents in the United States reported having serious adverse mental health condition of some degree by June of 2020, of 40.9%. Suicide among teens has risen 56% in 2020 alone. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for teens between ages 12 and 18. So, I know you don't, or you may know me personally. If you don't, you can still email me, message me on Facebook, message me on Noteworthy Mom, Koffee&Kiddos, or even my Honey at Home, or my personal page. You can email me on my my website. I'm sure that you can always get a hold of Kane if you know him, or your friends. Somebody will care. Get a hold of somebody. This system is broken. America is broken. Society is broken. But we're all broken to some degree. And whatever it is, that if you are going through suicidal thoughts or tendencies or a serious depression, most everybody, at least 3 out of 4 people, have gone through something. These statistics weren't pulled out of thin air. And, we've all felt broken or useless or unwanted in some way or another. And I know that you have. You went through a suicidal summer. And you have, because that one girl came up to you and asked you if you were okay. And
Yeah.
it really meant the world to you. And, so we've all been there. And the moment passes if you allow it to. And, so, just give it time and, just talk to somebody. At least talk to somebody before you go through something that can't be undone. And another statistic shows that of the 1 out of 12 kids, only 1 out of 12 is successful in a suicide. 9 out of 12 are glad that they weren't successful. So, anyways, keep on keeping on. This is this week's episode, so we'll see you next week.